All right. So in the rest of our class period today, I want to talk about classroom management. Classroom management. So I would like everybody just to tell me what came to your mind beside the letters to spell out on your paper. What comes to your mind? Each of you tell me or think about what comes to your mind when you hear the term classroom management. And there could be, there's about 6 or 7 different thoughts that come to my mind right away when I use that term. So you should have something come to mind. Everybody think about what comes to your mind when I use the term classroom management.
An organized schedule for the day.
Okay, like an agenda, an organized schedule for the day. All right?
Discipline.
Discipline. Okay, I'm sorry, discipline?
Of sorts.
Discipline of sorts. All right? Someone else. Those are the only 2 things that came to our mind. Davey.
I always think of a teacher.
Of a teacher. Classroom management, you think teacher. Okay, what do you think about the teacher?
I think of like the way he or she would like set an order of operations. They would control the class.
How they control a class and an order of operations. That sounds like a mathematical term. But all right, someone else. Someone else had their hand up when I was probing.
I guess I would think it all depends on preparation of the teacher. So I did think of teacher, but how the teacher prepares is how the day is going to go.
How the teacher prepares is how the day is going to go. I walk this way and Joy's like, can I get behind Sarah? Sarah.
I was thinking more like what Derek was going to say, so a way to keep the kids not going crazy.
Okay, a way to keep the kids not going crazy. All right, Megan?
It might be a little stretched, but I think of consistency.
Consistency. Okay. And Sarah?
I was thinking of a consistent atmosphere too with discipline.
A consistent atmosphere.
Like calm and not.
Okay, all right. Okay, so classroom management. In my opinion, and this is an opinion, I haven't gone out and measured it against something else, but in my opinion, classroom management is a modern term that covers the idea of a disciplined classroom. Having a disciplined classroom. And I think the reason the term has begun to be used is because the word discipline seems to be a little confusing to people. Okay? And this is why. If I were to come to you and say, you need to get some discipline in your life. Okay? There's a certain thing that comes to mind. Okay? If I came to you and said, he was trouble, I had to go discipline him. Probably a different thing comes to mind, right? And those words get used a lot. I don't know if it's 50-50, but they get used. It's not like one is just a very rare usage of the word and the other is the most common usage of the word. So they get used in both of those ways a lot. And so rather than confuse them, someone thought of the term classroom management for, I could say, you need to get some personal management in your life, right? It would be kind of odd to say it that way, but that's the idea of when I use the word discipline there, that's the idea of classroom management also. Classroom management is having a disciplined classroom. Having a disciplined classroom does not mean that everyone that you hand out swats on the way in the room keeps everybody disciplined, right? I mean, we know it doesn't mean that, but there's so typically though, if somebody's using classroom management, then how are they going to use the word discipline? Sarah?
Like keeping everything
the same, like consistent.
Well, that's what they're, actually that's what they're saying, that falls under classroom management. Okay, so that's fine. In my mind, in the way I see things, if somebody's talking about classroom management, you need to manage your classroom better, they're gonna say that kid needs some discipline. And they don't mean management. Okay. In older times, if you were reading, you might say a well-disciplined classroom. In a well-disciplined classroom, there might be a student who needs some punishment, correction, I saw. Okay, so discipline kind of can have a positive connotation or a negative connotation. Punishment is typically always negative. And classroom management is positive. Okay? Discipline can go one way or the other. It depends on its context. Right? So, when I was younger, I would hear people say things, and you might have heard something like this, 95% of education is discipline. You know, 95% of education depends on discipline. If you don't have discipline, you're not going to be educating. Okay, so that's just it's obvious. I'm sure it's not a researched percentage. It's just like somebody trying to say how important discipline is. Now, I would say that that 95% of that education isn't 95% discipline. Hopefully, it's not. Right? Imagine going to school and 95% of the time you're just either practicing your good discipline or receiving discipline for your bad practice of discipline. Okay. If 95% of education was discipline, you're not educating very much. Or you're a super educator in the last 5% of the time. Right? Okay. So, but at the same time, how much education really takes place if there's no discipline? Not much at all. If there's no discipline, you might get only 5% of what's being given. I mean, a teacher could get up and just be the greatest teacher, but no discipline, everybody's doing whatever. People are not getting very much education at all. Okay? So discipline is kind of foundational. A classroom management is foundational. It has to be there, but it should not even be recognized. It should be in the background. It sets the platform, it sets the stage for what you're there to do. So, I'm going to give you 7 key elements for effective classroom management. 7 key elements for effective classroom management. These are not in any order of importance or anything. Some of them will kind of overlap, the descriptions will, but 7 key elements for effective classroom management. So these are things that that you should use. If you use them well, your classroom will function smoothly, very little disruptions, very little disorder, and what you're trying to do, you will have the time to do because everything's going the way it should. The first thing, the first key element is planning. Did somebody say that already when we were talking about what comes to mind? Did somebody say preparation? Yeah. So planning. So with planning, next to it or under it or whatever, you should have everything ready for your class period. So all of these things that we're talking about, we could give a negative example of, right? You come to class and you don't have everything ready. You're in the middle of teaching and you realize that what you wanted to have ready or what you should have had ready, you don't have ready. What do? If it's near at hand, like at your desk, you can go to the back of the room and get it. But what happens while you're going to the back of the room and getting it? There's a lull. There's nothing to pay attention to except for you going to the back of your room and getting it. Okay? If it's not something that's at your desk, you improvise. And then you're not on, if you want to use a performance term, you're not on the top of your game because you're using a substitute material to do what you could do a good job with this, but you didn't bring it. And now you have to try to accomplish what you could do really well with this with nothing or with something else. And so you're not going to be as engaging. So have everything ready. Another thing, and this relates to classrooms, all classrooms, but much more to elementary type classrooms, and that is, this is with planning, smooth transitions. Plan. You need to think through and plan how you're going to transition from one activity to another, from one subject to another, smooth transitions. Yeah.
How would you accomplish that?
Well, it depends on the age level and all. Well, I think the answer is in my third point. Okay? If after my third point I haven't addressed it, raise your hand again. Okay? Second point is establish usable rules. Establishing usable rules. And really, they're all important words. But one thing that often happens is that teachers establish rules, but they're not very usable. They're not very effective. They don't help things go smoothly. I should sometime write down examples here. But just as a very simple example, how are we going to turn our papers in? How do papers get turned in? Do they all get just thrown on the desk before class? Or do we pass them forward in a certain order and then stack them one on top of another or one below another? There's just a lot of variety there, and they have to be usable for both the teacher and the students. I'm drawing a blank at the moment, but I've heard of, and maybe I've even made certain rules that, like, you gotta do this and this and this, and it's like they need to do that, but then when it comes time to actually performing it, it's not really helping the students, and it's not really helping me, and it's not a useful rule. Okay? You're going to have enough rules and routines in your classroom as it is. We want them to be useful so that you can, so along with the example of turning in papers across the board, so that you can have consistent enforcement. If you have a rule, you need to enforce it. And you need to enforce it consistently. From day to day, from student to student, it needs to be always enforced. If you get a few times when you think, this rule doesn't need to be enforced, maybe your rule needs adjustment. Every once in a while, rules don't fit the particular situation and they don't need adjusted, they need overruled. But normally teachers don't overrule things, administrators overrule things. That's part of their job description. But in your classroom, you want to have usable rules. The third thing is getting off to a good start. People have written whole books on the first day of school. Harry Wong, I think is his name. Getting off to a good start. Getting off to a good start. So here, at the beginning of school, you want to practice your routines. Okay? So as much as I said that when you teach, you're not teaching discipline, for the first week of school, you might be spending a lot of time teaching classroom management and discipline. You just teach it, practice it. When the fire alarm goes off, what do we do? Okay. If we don't explain and teach what to do, what's going to happen when the fire alarm goes off? Okay? When somebody walks into the door, what do we do? If we don't explain and practice, then what's going to happen when someone walks in the door? Okay? So, you establish routines. You think through your transitions. Okay? So you're going to have your subjects, but you're not going to teach much of your subjects for the first week of school or whatever. You know, as the kids get older and they've been through routines, they can learn, oh, Mr. Sins likes it this way. You know, it's a little different from last year, but it fits the same purpose, and so it doesn't take as much practice. But, so you think through, we're going from math class, and in all the time, when we get done with math class, we're going to band. So big transition, not just putting the math book in the desk and pulling. So big transition. So what do we want to have happen? Think it through, even practice it, and then sometimes when it's a lot of physical activity, what you thought through doesn't really look, when you actually do it, it doesn't look like what you thought it would. So you make an adjustment to it. In fact, I saw something, I was at a conference 2 Fridays ago, and I saw something about classroom management of a band classroom. And I thought, you know, I can do that. So I came to band on Tuesday and said, from now on, we're doing this. And that's hard, because they've already been doing it for 6 months, or for half the year. But we're doing it this way. And then and I said, okay, so let's go outside and we'll restart how we're going to come into the classroom. And we walked in and I saw it and I said, one of the things I told them, they ended up crawling over top of one another, and that was not what we wanted. I mean, not literally crawling, but it was just, there's a whole, in the band room, there's 3 levels there, and they were all using the one. And I said, okay, so we can use all 3 of those and it'll be smoother. Okay, so, but you figure those out and you practice routines. In that class, even then, I spent the time, we walked all the way out. We didn't walk outside, but we walked all the way out to act like we were just coming into the band room so that we could practice coming into the band room. Do they learn what a C or an F sharp is by practicing how to come into the band room? No. But if they come in the band room quickly, quietly, efficiently, they get right to their place, there's not much goofing off, and they're ready 3 or 4 minutes earlier than what they normally are, then we're going to learn more. And actually, their mind is going to stay there. I have in the past always let them just kind of talk because it's band. They can talk once they have their instrument out and get ready. I always had their instrument away from their stand. Because if it's near their stand, I know people are walking around there. I didn't want people to walk on it. Well, if I say everybody go straight to your place, put your instrument right there, everybody's done walking, aren't they? So now their instrument is right there. Nobody's going to walk on it and all that. So anyway, just routines and practice those. So practice your routines early. Along the way, be thinking, is this the first time the students have done this? You might come to something, whether it's an academic thing or a classroom management thing. If it's the first time, you want to try to think ahead of time as a student, how are they going to do it? How do you need to explain what you want done? And if you think through that rather than it coming to you, oh wow, we've never done this before, have we? Boom. No! You know, and we don't know what to do. So you want to work on getting off to a good start. Practice routines early. Think of things that are first. The 4th thing is provide clear directions. Provide clear directions. Now, the amount of directions you can give would depend on the age of the students, wouldn't it? You don't go to your first graders and say, okay, so when I say to go ahead, you're going to do, and then list out 6 things that they need to do in order. Okay? Unless it's just like pull your chair out, stand up, you know, and then walk over here. But as they get older, they can remember to do things, more things in order, more complicated things. But you want to give clear directions, whether it's directions on completing an assignment or anything else. Many times we say, do it. Do it's not very clear. How am I to do it? Somebody might, I mean, they're willing to do it. What am I supposed to do exactly? Just get it done. Well, you can say that to somebody who's 25 years old, but not to students necessarily. Monitoring the classroom environment. So this is number 5, the 5th one, monitoring the classroom environment. So the arrangement of the room, even the comfort level of the room. Sometimes you don't have much control over it, but if you are monitoring, if you're aware of things, you can interact with those things and help keep control. I mean, if it's hot, you can adjust your instructions perhaps for that, or if it's cold. Okay, typically we have a rule that you don't sit in class with your coat on. Okay, it's not a college rule, obviously. You're all like, oh really? Okay, but typically we have a rule: you don't sit in class with your coat on. You take your coat off. You're there. You're paying attention. Okay? But sometimes it's cold. We have this Rolls-Royce heating and air conditioning system that's running on one cylinder. No, not really, but we don't even know how to make it work. So sometimes it's like blistering hot in the summer and it's freezing cold in the winter. And you can't just go to the thing and push the button. You have to call somebody and they have to get on the computer and figure out why it's doing that. Well, it's nice because when it runs smoothly, nobody has to do a thing. It just takes care of it. But if it's out of order, it's not a simple thing to just a thermostat. Okay, so it's winter time or it's fall. The system thinks it's warm, so it's chilling the room even more. Okay, you can leave your coats on. Okay, but if I'm just like, we have this rule, kids are shivering. They're not really paying attention very much because they're freezing. Am I going to get much teaching done if I haven't monitored the classroom situation? And so I'm, keeping my rule, but I'm not managing my classroom. So room arrangements, seating arrangements. Hopefully we're all grown up here and we can pay attention to the teacher regardless of who we're sitting next to. Well, it's a classic example at the older ages, okay? But younger ages, people are, there's the one that whoever he's sitting next to, he's going to cause trouble, okay? Or there's the two that regardless of if they're near each other, they're going to cause trouble. If they're away from each other, they're really good students. Okay? But near each other, there's trouble. So room arrangements, seating arrangements, even being aware of people asking questions, unnecessary questions. Or helping with somebody who asks a question. If I'm over here helping Devante with his homework, What's likely to happen if I'm helping him here with this homework? What is already happening behind my back? Right? Okay. So, if you're monitoring the classroom, so rather than help Devontae like this, I can come over here and help Devontae, right? Just simple little things like that. Those help you monitor the classroom environment. The sixth one, keep records efficiently. Keep records efficiently. Now, this is probably the most tedious part of teaching. And there are, I mean, especially with the way technology is, people are continually trying to find ways to make this more efficient and better. But this part, and probably this is the most neglected part of teaching, but those that do it well will, of course, swear by its usefulness and will use that very much in their interaction with parents mostly. I'll give some explanation. Keeping records efficiently. So you keep written documentation of notes to and from parents, discipline notes, even anecdotal records such as conferences and phone calls. So for each student, you're going to have a file that says, you know, they really had a hard time today, or call the parents and let them know this, had a conference, whatever. So you have a file, and in the file, you have a record of your interaction, your individual interactions with the student. Okay. Now it seems, and most of this is for evidence purposes. You know, we can be all like, how wonderful it is to teach, but teaching is dealing with human beings and not just the kids. The parents are human beings. Parents always think that their kid could do no wrong, you know, and so if you're having a problem with a child, it's very likely that parents will say something to the principal like, all of a sudden he's in trouble and I had no idea. Okay. If you have a record saying, I called, I left a message, we had a conference, I sent a note home, I received this note from them, and it's all there, then you can say, you know, no, you knew. Look, I did all these things. You don't want to be gotcha, vindictive, or anything like that. But if you are working with their child, you don't want them saying, he hasn't been doing anything. They haven't been, as far as I knew, he was doing just fine. So, some type of record keeping that is efficient. And efficient's the key word here, because beside, the reason this gets neglected is because there's papers to grade, there's lessons to prepare, all the stuff that actually happens in the classroom takes time. And then to have to keep records of that stuff too is even more time. So efficiently keeping those records is important, and finding a system to do that that works for you is very important. And there are lots of different books out there. And here, you know, if you foresee yourself being a teacher, you should read some things about it. And in the realm of education, almost everything you read is going to be written by a secular author. Okay. Now we get about philosophy and the importance of Christian education. Lots of Christian writers, but not many Christian writers are writing classroom management books. They're just not. So there are some good ones out there, but they're not Christians. And educators are of the more, I would say, they're of the more liberal bent. So there's a certain thing, they can tell you some things that are really good about classroom management and about teaching, but their philosophy and their belief system is not Christian and liberal. And so for them, they might think that it's how's the way to say it? Well, let's just say many of them will use foul language and talk about things that are that are quite uncomfortable to us, and they just think that they ought to because they're on the front lines of liberation. We don't want to be held back by any of these things of the past. Okay, so I don't think you see much of that in our library, but you might if it's from a secular educator. You're going to run into that type of stuff, especially language, especially in the language arts, in English and speech and that type of thing. They just, being very realistic. The world talks about these things and discusses these things, and so they're going to put it in textbook form. So anyway, that's a side note. Keep efficient records. And then the seventh one, creating strategies for managing interruptions. Create strategies for managing interruptions. Now there's two types of interruptions that we're going to have in a classroom. And they're so obvious I won't ask the question because you're going to say, why did I have to think about that? One are ones that we expect to get, and others are ones that we don't expect to get. Anticipated or unanticipated. If I'm going to use a certain kind of equipment at a certain time in the class period, when I switch from doing what I normally do to using the equipment, that's an interruption in the class. If I'm handing materials out, if I say, okay, now I'm going to hand out these materials, that's an interruption in what we're doing. There's beginning an activity, ending an activity, transitions between classes or activities. All of those are interruptions. We kind of talked about them from another viewpoint. But those and all of those are things that you know, and you know they're going to happen, and you kind of even know when they're going to happen. So you create strategies for managing that. Then there's unanticipated interruptions, and we create strategies for those too. Most of them, we know will happen over the course of the year. Or maybe we'd say some of them we know will happen over the course of the year. We just don't know when. We know, if I'm an elementary teacher, I know that somebody's going to get sick in my classroom. I'm with them for 5 hours a day for 180 days out of the year, and there's 20 of them. Somebody's going to get sick. Their stomach's going to be upset. They're going to have to do something. Okay? What should they do? Okay. So we create a strategy. We explain, when you feel sick, this is what you do. Your sickness suspends other rules. Okay? If you're just kind of not feeling well, you have a headache or something, you can raise your hand and let me know. But if you feel like you're really sick, you don't need to raise your hand, right? You just go grab the can on your way to the bathroom, right? But we create a strategy for that, and we explain those strategies. When a visitor walks in the room, what do we do when a visitor walks in the room? Okay? We decide ahead of time. We don't know when a visitor is going to walk in the room, depending on the school office and the hallways and all that. It might not happen that often, but it very well probably is going to happen. Somebody's going to walk in that we're not expecting. But if we know what to do when that happens, we don't know when it's going to happen, but we know what to do when it does happen. Loss of power, equipment failure, fire drills, all of those types of, there's things that can and often do happen, we just don't know when. So we create strategies for handling those. interruptions. All right. Then, as we finish, I would like to just throw out some. Each of these are connected to the idea of discipline, but they're not in any kind of an order. Just some random thoughts about classroom management or discipline or punishment and that. First one is that children who have discipline problems, children who are always, causing trouble, but even maybe they're not even causing trouble, they're just getting into trouble a lot. Most often, they have problems at home. Parental difficulties, we might say. It might not be that they have a bad relationship with their parents. Sometimes they do. But their parents have a problem with discipline. If kids can do whatever they want at home, and I don't mean just bad things, if they don't have to make their bed, if they don't, when they finish supper, have some routine about what to do with the dishes that are on the table, how do the dishes get from on the table back into the cabinets? If there's no routine, if it just kind of goes and then somebody does something, or they don't do anything and mom is always cleaning up, if they don't have any structure, they're going to have a hard time having their red pen when it's time to grade papers. Or any other thing. If you have a structured classroom and kids, that's the only place they have structure, one thing is they will enjoy that in a certain sense because they finally have some structure, but they will have a hard time with it because they're not used to that anywhere else in their life. So what do you do? I want each of you to think, I'm a teacher. I have a student who's having a real hard time in school, and it's just with little things. It's just little discipline things. I've done a visit in their home, and I see that their home is completely undisciplined. How can I help that kid? What can you do? All right, Jacob's like, yeah, okay. So before he says it, just understand he's saying this about his idea. He doesn't know if it's like absolutely should do. Go ahead.
Maybe not necessarily suspend rules, but reinforce any positive behavior as much as possible. Letting them know when they do follow the rules that yes, this is good, we want to push that, and not necessarily drop a hammer on them constantly. Because they may get discouraged, they may think, oh, I can't do this, that kind of situation.
Okay. He doesn't like that, but it came to mind.
Maybe help them with giving them some sort of incentive, or like some sort of schedule, something that they can enjoy. I don't know.
Okay.
Planning out or helping them be organized.
Help them on their own to do it. To somehow help them to be disciplined in their personal life outside of the classroom without...
Or even in the classroom, like having a checklist or something that
Okay.
maybe have an incentive to, hey, how many times can you get this
Okay.
correct, and just help them.
Okay.
I think that it's very vital to have help from home. There needs to start in the home, so maybe a meeting with parents,
Maybe a meeting with parents. Okay. What do you say in your meeting with the parents?
Well, I mean, you're obviously not
Okay.
going to go in and, restructure their home, but you would bring up the fact that, the results in school might be indicative of, lack of...
Okay, now that's the second time I've heard that word today. Indicative. Yeah. When I was walking up here, Jordan
The funny thing is that's what I normally
said
say,
indicative.
But I heard him say that, and I was like, maybe I say it wrong.
Oh, no. Indicative. Okay. Yeah, because we walked out together, and he was saying that was indicative, and I thought, where did he get indicative? Anyway, you're right, and you're right to be cautious about it. So you can't go into, you really, if a home is undisciplined, you got to help the home. Okay? But you're the teacher. You're the teacher. You're not their dad. You're not the administrator of the school. You're not their pastor. You're just a teacher. Okay? So, to me, your talking with them is going to be more suggestions. If you can paint a picture, this is what we do in class. You know, as soon as this, then this, and then this, and this. And I noticed that Billy, he doesn't understand that once this is done, he should immediately do this. He should just go from this to this to this. He doesn't understand the routines. He's having a real hard time with them. And so he gets halfway through something, and then he doesn't finish it. So maybe if you could set up some routines here in the home so that he gets used to always doing things at a certain time, it would probably help him in school. I don't know. Just when he gets up, he always, pulls the sheet up and the blanket up and puts the pillow in a certain spot, and then, and then goes straight to the bathroom and brushes his teeth. Just make up something. I don't know. If he could learn that whenever supper is over, he always takes his plate from the table and sits it in a stack next to the sink. Now, what's gonna happen? It's gonna be a home where they don't even eat supper. I mean, they eat food, but they just grab this or grab that. There's really. Hopefully, our kids from Christian homes have some things together. But if you're in a ministry, you're gonna have kids in your home or in your classroom that are coming from not even Christian homes. And so in those homes, in a certain sense, you may be able to help them with more structure because they don't have, I don't know. I'm not going to say it because, but I think it makes sense. It does to me. If it doesn't to you, fine. Most discipline problems, another idea, most discipline problems can be solved with a well-managed classroom. I have lots more different things here, but let me say something. And I know, well, here's the teacher who gives out the most demerits. This is a generalization, so there could be an exception, but he or she is the worst disciplinarian. The best disciplinarian gives out very little demerits. Now, some people don't manage their classroom at all and also don't give out demerits. They just let anything go. Okay? But a classroom that's running smoothly is being well managed, is a well-disciplined classroom, and not many demerits get given out. Okay? So if you're giving out a lot of demerits, just say, well, that's because I hold them to a high standard. No, you're not a good disciplinarian.